Okay, now that you have your space set up, you have your placemat out. I'm using a piece of cardboard today, but that's just because I did not have the placemat with me at home. So all of your placemats will be out. You will have your slab of clay. It should be nice and rolled out for you. It won't be perfectly symmetrical. You will have variations on the sides, so if you're going to cut a different shape into it, make sure that you have enough room. You might even sketch out on the surface just lightly. So if I was going to do a heart, kind of figure out how that's going to fit in the piece. And then if it doesn't work, you can take your finger, maybe even dip it into your water container, and smooth it out if that's not how you want it to be on your clay. Don't carve all the way through the first time. Just kind of think about that process, where it's going to fit. You know, turn your clay, make it work however you want. So you have your clay tools and you are set to go. So if I'm going to do, I'm just going to do an organic shape so that it is not anything in particular. And I am carving straight down and all the way through to make sure that it's nice clean edge. Get rid of some of the stuff I don't want, and then set that to the side. Now that I have that, I can take my finger, even if I need a little bit of water. If your clay is a little dry, you can use a little bit of water. Mine's pretty wet, so I'm able to just kind of smooth some of these sharper edges out. Remember, we talked about last week making sure that the sharp edges are gone. Otherwise, your yarn, when you start weaving, when we're finished glazing these, will get cut on those edges. So you want to smooth all of that out. You don't just want to do the front side, you also want to turn it over and do it on the back. So you have a nice smooth surface all the way around. And your edges will be kind of curved in a little bit. So that's what you're looking for. So if that helps just show you, you want them curved in a little bit. Make sure there's no little clay pieces lingering. And kind of check all the way around now that you've turned it over and make sure that it's good, okay? Once that's done, then you want to cut your center hole where your weaving will show on your clay piece. So I'm just going to, again, cutting straight down into the clay. I'm going to do a simple circle. This is another time where if you want to sketch it out first lightly on the top of the clay before you go ahead and carve into it, it's a great idea. Make sure that you get, and I'm just kind of pushing gently from the back to get that out. But if you want to sketch it out first, that's fine too. And now we're going to smooth again, smoothing all those rough edges out. Not a lot of water is needed. If you're going to use it, just the tip of your finger goes into the water container, onto the sponge, and then just smooth, smooth, smooth. If you get really, really wet, then it's going to make a big soupy mess on your clay piece. And I'm going to turn it over again. Make sure both sides are nice and smooth. Once you've done that, check again both sides. Always kind of clearing your space, making sure nothing's over here where you're working. Kind of push it over to the side if you pull little pieces off or whatever. All right, the next step is to add our holes. I do have hole punching tools. These would work great, although I think this one's a little big because there's not enough room for this to fit and leave enough space on both sides. You kind of want a finger width between the edge of your clay and the inside hole. If you don't have that, you're definitely going to want to use either a different clay tool or a pencil to poke your holes. I'm going to use this one today because I feel like this is going to be perfect. I'm going all the way down in, making sure I push and kind of wiggle my clay tool down in there. And remember, you want an odd number of holes as well. So I'm going to count here in a moment. Oh, that one's kind of close to the edge, so I might have to work on that one because that could crack when it dries. So that's a bad idea. I don't know how well you can see that right now. Zoom in here for a little bit. So on this one, the inside is a little thin, and when I push my clay tool down in there, it pushed the clay out. So I kind of just smoothed it back over to make sure that it didn't go clear through and break my clay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 13, 14, and I'm going to end on 15 right here. Now, with using this tool, since it's round on the end, it did not give me the all the way through hole. So if I pick it up, you can't see my hand underneath there. So I'm going to turn it over. Actually, I'm just going to hold it up and poke all the way through with my clay tool, and then bring it back all the way through. And this may happen even if you're using a pencil on your placemat. So this is a great method to make sure that those holes go all the way through. And if you're afraid to pull it back through, just slide it all the way through. That's totally fine as well. So a couple different ideas there, methods. If you're scared to pull it back through, you're afraid you're going to break it, especially on places like this where it's super thin. But now you can see where my hand is showing through on the holes that I have done completely versus the ones I have not. Keep going here. Actually, pushing through seems to be much easier for me, so I'm just going to keep going with that. All right, now I have all of my holes punched. I know I have an odd number, but the back is a mess. So now I need to take my finger and clean up all of these excess pieces. I'm just kind of setting them over to the side so they don't get in my way or get stuck to the front of my clay piece while I'm working. It just makes more work for me. So I'm kind of setting them over to the side. Remember, an odd number is important for our weaving process so that when you do the over-under in the circle weaving, that you don't end up with the same pattern, so that you do have that over-under, and then the opposite when you're going back through. And we will go over how to weave again when we get finished glazing our pieces, and I will demonstrate that with you as well. So I'm going to finish smoothing these guys out. Just kind of removing all the little excess guys. Some of you may find it easier to actually use your clay tool, especially if you don't like clay under your fingernails. Just kind of use this guy, and he will smooth it out for you too. I find it easier sometimes to use my fingers rather than using the clay tool. Sometimes it just pushes it back down in there where I don't want it. So you definitely want your holes big enough, the size of a pencil. Don't use anything smaller. Using a pointy tool or even the end of this won't be enough space for you to get your yarn through there when you're weaving. So we wanted to make them nice and big so it's easy for you to thread that needle through that hole so that you're not worried about getting that needle through there and struggling with that process. And also remember, when clay dries, it does shrink. So you want to make sure that you have a big enough hole that after it is dried and fired and then glazed, that you do not have an issue with getting your yarn and needle threaded through that hole. So that's why we're making them so big. It does seem a little big for just a little piece of yarn, but there you have it. We have our holes. This would be my front side. This would be my back where it's a little sloppier. I will come around and write your names in your clay. So try to leave me a little room to fit those in. I'm going to put my name on here so I know that one's mine. The other thing that you will have the option to do, and you can do this in the beginning or the end, is to use these rubbing plates to create texture onto your clay. So that's the other requirement for the project. You do not have to use the rubbing plates, but just to demonstrate how they work, there is a smoother side to these and a rougher side. You definitely want the more bumpy side down. So I'm going to turn this one over, and you want to press pretty hard, a very firm push. Now, if you have softer clay, it may change the shape of your clay piece. So it might be best if you do that in the beginning. Now that I have that texture on there, that portion's good. And I can just work around this piece, only adding texture to the outside edge. Again, pressing firmly and consistently to make sure that that shows up. It's a little harder where there's a little less space, but you can always go over it. And again, if you don't like the way it looks, don't be afraid to take your finger in a little bit of water and rub it out and then do it again, okay? So this guy needs a little help. He's my breakable side here. I'm just going to kind of doctor him up a little bit, and I will come around and check and make sure that none of your holes have any cracks or any thin edges like that one does, to make sure that when they dry, everything does come out okay. So once you're finished with this, you are going to get a piece of cardboard, a smaller square of cardboard. You're going to slide that underneath your clay piece after I write your name on it, and you will put it on the cart, and I will roll them in the back so that they have time to dry, and then I'll fire them, and we will be glazing in just another week. Thanks so much. Enjoy, guys.